So what we want to do in this video is sort of get the end game scenario working, and then see if we can add some sound effects as well. Now we're basically done. So where we've got here is this. We're going to work on this edge reached, okay? And so I'll just move these around a little bit. Okay, so that one's frozen. What's happened here? Oh, okay, I'm not sure. There we go. So something was a little bit odd. Okay, let me just move this over. Sure, I could probably minimize some of these, but anyways. Okay, so what we want to deal is with the edge reach, and I think I sort of put my mouse over it at one point, and we were able to see that it talked about what the edges were. I think it's when you're in there, you can see. Now it's a little bit odd. And you can look at a diagram. I don't have one handy here, but basically the bottom edge is labeled -1. Okay, so that's the one we're interested in here. So we don't always want it to bounce. We want it to bounce, I guess, most of the time, but if it hits the bottom, we don't want that to happen. And so what we're going to do is basically put a conditional in, okay? So we're going to put a control in here, if, and actually I'll just pull this out for the moment, throw this in, and we want to make it if else, basically. If and else, okay. And so our default condition is going to be this, okay? If it hits anything but the edge, okay, or if it hits anything but -1, okay, that side, the bottom edge, then it will bounce. If it hits the edge, so we're going to put our conditional here, if, and we need a math one, so an equality with our single equal sign, which I dislike, but if the edge is equal to, I'm just going to copy our number block here and paste it, is equal to -1, then what's it going to do? Well, what should we do here? Probably we want to tell the player that game's over, okay? And we probably want to freeze the ball. So let's tell them that the game's over. And so what I'm going to do is basically set the text. So I'm just going to grab this one. I think that's the only one we got. I'm just going to grab this one. Okay, so that's set score text. So set score text to, I'm actually going to get rid of this. I'll get rid of that because the score will now, whoops, just disappear. I'm going to get rid of this join because we don't want to join anymore. We just want to change the text to happy label of game over. All caps. We're going to yell at them. And a couple exclamation marks. 3 exclamation marks. All right. So we want to tell them the game's over. The second thing we want to do is we don't want the ball to continue moving because it's kind of weird if your game's over but the ball's still moving. And so we'll just grab that from the reset button where we had the ball that was enabled to false. So I'll copy and I'll paste and I'll put that in there. So we've got the ball enabled to false, okay? So if it hits the bottom, it does these things. If it's not the bottom that it hits, else, it will just keep it bouncing, okay? And that's what we want there. All right, the next thing we want to do is add some sounds to our game, make it a little bit more exciting. And so what we'll do is we'll go back to the designer, and in our media, we're going to grab a sound component here. Now there is player, okay? That's more for music, sort of longer played things. Sound is usually for a quicker thing. So sound would probably be our better situation here. So we can drag that in, and remember it's a non-visible component. Now the other thing we have to do is upload some files, and so I've got a few files here that you'll have access to, and basically there's these 4 ones here. So they're all very fancy, so just upload them there. And actually I'll pause and just you can do those. And so I've brought in those 4 sounds that will probably make use of them all, I think. All right, so you don't have to bring in a separate sound component for each one. You just have to tell App Inventor that you're going to use a sound. And so I'm not actually going to set the source here. We could, but we don't need to, because we can do that right in the blocks. And I hope you're seeing there that these properties, even though they're here, you don't really have to use them, because you can change them all in the blocks. And in fact, that kind of is a better way of doing it. So what we're going to do is actually create a procedure, because we're going to do sort of call the sound 3 times. And so in order to do, and sort of the 3 times that we're going to do it is when the game's over, when it hits an edge, okay, and also when it collides with the paddle here, okay. So we're going to have 3 separate sounds, and basically we want, it's going to do the same thing. It's just going to do it, with different sources. So we'll deal with that here. We'll create a procedure, okay, just like we did before. So call a procedure, and we'll call it play sound. And it will take a parameter, and so click on this. Our input is going to be a sound source. Okay. So what does it have to do? Well, it has to do 2 things. One, it has to get the source of the sound, okay, and then it has to play it. And so both of those can be found in our sound one. So we are going to set our sound source first, set sound source, okay, and it's going to be to whatever the source that the function tells us here. And then the other thing we have to do is get it to play that sound, okay. So call the sound to play. And so that is our procedure there, okay? And so basically now we're going to call that procedure here, okay? We're going to call that procedure here. So that's when the game's over. We're going to get it when the ball bounces. And we're also going to do that right here when it collides with the paddle, okay? Now, each of these, they've got a block here that's missing, and we need to put in, and that's the source, right? So the sound source is going to be one of these 3 here, okay? Now, I'm going to just copy this text box, and I'm going to put it here, I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to put it here, because we need to, sorry, there we are. We need to change these names, okay? So the sound source, when the game's over, is going to be the buzzer. So the buzzer.mp3. And you have to spell it exactly the way it is, okay? Including the capitals. Okay, so that's going to be the buzzer. When it hits the edge, that's just the note. So that's note.wave, and that one's lowercase. And then if it hits the paddle, that's going to be the no ink one. So a capital and then no ink, and it was a MP3. Okay. No ink, MP3. Okay, good. So I think those are all correct there. So this idea of putting in a procedure, even though it's really short, I mean, it was just 2 lines of code, it's going to make our next step, and really our last step, just that little bit easier. Now, the last real step that we're going to do is give the user an option to turn off or on the sound. And so what we're going to do is go back to the designer, and we're going to put a new block in, or a new option, a new label here. So I think it's under the user interface. There's a checkbox, and I'm going to just plop it into here. If I can get it in, there we go. Checkbox for sound. And so I'll just call this, I'll just call it sound. Okay, I mean basically sound on or sound off. And it's a checkbox that you can, check it on and off. And you can see the default, you can either check it or not check it. So there, okay. And so if you click on it, it will check it. So we're going to use that to control our sound. Now, because we have this, playing the sound as a procedure here, dealing with the checkbox becomes so much easier, because again, if we didn't have it here, we'd have to code it 3 times. And so again, even though it was pretty simple at the start, as we add some more complexity to it, having it as a separate procedure just makes everything, so much easier overall. So what we're going to do here is basically just do an if statement. And so I'm going to, because it's going to be one of these control ones. So if, and I think what I'll do is just pull these out for the moment. So if, well, what? Well, if it's checked, okay? So if the sound is checked, so there's my checkbox. So we just want to check the box here. So it's if, where is the checked? Oh, there we are. So if the checkbox is checked is basically what it's saying. So we don't have to use a is true or whatever. It's just basically if it is checked, then do this. Now, you could sort of put an else and then nothing, but that sort of, the computer knows that. It will only play this if it's true. Okay? And that's it. Easy, right? So one last thing I think I'll do though is, now that I sort of think about it, it's probably a better idea to have it checked at the start. So we default to sound on, and then, after it doesn't do that. So yeah, I mean, that's basically the game. I mean, you could make things a little bit better, and you'll have an opportunity to do that. You might want to change this from just being gray or sort of white to some sort of different color background, or whatever the case is. It's up to you. Fix that paddle, make it a more interesting game, and I'll give you some suggestions to make it a better game. But there is your basic Pong style game. Okay, try it out. Make sure it's working. And then, like I said, I'll give you the opportunity to make some modifications there. All right. See you later.